Hello? So you're saying, oh, exactly. I didn't know if I got that right. Just kidding. This is a pack of gum. I am no James Bond with a new gum phone, but I'm sure you've heard that story. Bart Ehrman likes to say the telephone game of explaining how the oral tradition of the Gospels developed over time is just like the telephone game. That over time, as the message is passed from one to another, the story becomes modified and changed. So I was listening to Mark Goodacre today. He was explaining how the telephone game works and how that people often apply that to oral tradition. He actually, from England, learned it from a much different name. But I'm not going to mention that one on YouTube here. But what I'm trying to allude to is he was saying there's actually a great flaw. And it's something to think about when you think about the oral tradition behind the Gospels, of how they developed as one recipient heard it and retold a message to another. As he pointed out that that is not actually accurate of how oral tradition develops before the written text does. Because with the telephone game, you're all sitting in a circle, one person sharing with another, sharing with another, sharing with another, till it gets to the final speaker, the writer of the gospel is in our application. But he pointed out that in true oral tradition, you have multiple people speaking of the events and sharing in discussions. And there is no lineal development of the stories, but rather as the different speakers speak, people pick from those stories as, oh, I like how that person said it. Oh, I remember more accurately because I was there how this was said here. And little twists like that. And even accurately to be said, in the gospel tradition, most of us are confident that Jesus preached and taught in Aramaic. But the Gospels are written in Koine Greek. So they obviously have a translation happening there. Unless you're going to say, Jesus, a Jew from Galilee, did not speak Aramaic but spoke Koine Greek. But if you don't go that path, there is a translation happening. And just like every new edition of the Bible comes out with a new translation that is either more accurate or more understandable, the same has happened with the gospel traditions, as the different writers are trying to present a more accurate or a more understandable version of the story, because they too are translating. Even if they had the mysterious lost gospel of the exact written text, which I am doubtful exists, but let's just pretend some of those people throw out that theory that Matthew, as a tax collector, knew how to write, so he'd sit down and do shorthand of the Sermon on the Mount. Let's even pretend that that happened, that Matthew wrote shorthand the entire Sermon on the Mount. Can you do word for word in shorthand? But let's just pretend he did. Word for word, he wrote it down. But he would have written down in Aramaic. So whenever the gospel writers, is it Mark, Matthew, Luke, or John, or anyone got a hold of this, they had to translate it. And if you know anything about languages, you know it's rare, almost impossible, to translate word for word, especially if you want to be understood. So the same as happens with this in the telephone game. We don't have a word-for-word translation. We can never have a word for translation. We never will. Even if a mysterious, untranslated, original written gospel signed by Jesus himself, even if that gospel was found, those teachings, for you to read them, someone has to translate them. And if they translate them, they have now modified the meaning. Hopefully they've done a good job. Hopefully it is more understandable, and hopefully it is more accurate. But it has been modified. And we have to be okay with that. We are doing cross-cultural learning, cross-cultural history. You have to be okay with small changes. And you have to be okay with the story developing as different things get clarified. But at the same time, if you're looking for historical accuracy, you have to figure out how to weigh the different material to see which one brings you closer back to what the original story was, the original event. Did Jesus enter Jericho? Was there one blind beggar or two? When Jesus rode into Jerusalem, was the crowd celebrating the coming of their king, their Messiah, or were they crying out for salvation? Both are recorded. But if you really want accuracy historically and you think it matters, then you're going to have to learn how to weigh between the two, or the three, or the four, and then bring it back to a clear understanding. But now you have become part of the telephone game. Now you have become one of the receivers and the speakers. And I hope you did a bang-up job, because people are listening to you, and they will hopefully have the same grace as Jesus says you have shown to them.